Joining me on the program now is theologian and media chaplain, Reverend Frank Ritchie. Kia ora, thanks for your time.
Kia ora, Andrew. Always a pleasure to hang out.
Now, you and I have spoken about fasting over the years a few times, and it always brings its own challenges. But firstly, do you think it is becoming back in vogue? It's almost trendy now, fasting and Lenten self-denial and all those sorts of things. It's become the opposite of itself.
Yeah, I think if you'd gone back to my childhood, my teenage years, even my 20s, to say that you were fasting was seen as a really weird, strange thing.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's a bit of a health kick.
Yeah.
People have discovered the health benefits of fasting. So intermittent fasting is a thing where you do things like skip breakfast to give your body time to regenerate its cells, etc.
Yep.
So there's a whole lot of health information out there about fasting. So now when you talk about fasting, it's not a strange thing. But when I talk about fasting now with people, I try to emphasize the fact that I do it for spiritual reasons, not necessarily health reasons. Because
Exactly.
everybody assumes you're doing it for health reasons.
Because, I mean, honestly, who would have thought that something in the Bible turns out to be good for us? You know, I mean, that's a bit of a shock. But actually, not just so that you'll look great on the Insta, but actually perhaps in a less tangible way, doing without, not just so that you can be a bit self-righteous about it, but for the positive spiritual benefit that it brings.
Yeah, very much so. And I think when I scan Christian history, like I can see pockets of communities that could probably benefit a lot from fasting and self-denial, usually those who were hedonistic and indulging themselves a lot. But I think our much wider culture now is built on that. It's built on the idea that the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of pleasure, the pursuit of feeling good is everything. So the idea of self-denial, I think, is a call back to our humanity and a reminder that there are greater things in life, that we're built for greater things, and that happiness and pleasure are not the chief pursuits of life. And to engage in self-denial then, I think, is a wildly countercultural, subversive thing to do that reminds us of our humanity and our place before God.
Especially if we get beyond the food issue, because I think as a society we've come to terms with the fact that food isn't always our friend, or we have perhaps a negative relationship with that. But self-denial generally, putting aside your gratification and putting a bit of self-control in there, as you say, these are very countercultural and so much more than food. Or is that just a bit of a cop-out? Oh, yeah, I'm doing a social media fast. I mean, I know for some people that's like cutting off a hand, but is that a cop-out instead of actually giving up chocolate or booze or whatever it is, which may be between them and their relationship with God?
No, I don't think it's a cop out at all. I think social media in particular is a really good thing to fast from, where it's built for you to engage in the opposite of self-control.
Yeah.
I mean, there are documentaries around that you can watch now that talk to the guy who created the scroll. So rather than having to flick to another page to look at the next thing, to scroll. And the whole idea of that was to keep you there as long as possible. So employing some self-control and deciding to put that down, I think, is extremely healthy. And self-control is one of the fruits of the Spirit. If we go to Galatians and we look at the list of the fruits of the Spirit, self-control is one of them. Now, when it talks about the fruit of the Spirit, it's talking about a life steeped in the Spirit. So when it lists those things, they're not things it's saying you should pursue. It's saying that those are things that should come out of your life in the Spirit. But I think those things are good to pursue. And when the Bible talks about prayer and fasting, those things often go together. And there are instances in the Bible where prayer wasn't really working, so fasting or self-control was encouraged. So I think these are wonderful things to pursue.
And let's jump into that fruits of the Spirit aspect, because self-control and self-denial in some ways are very different things. And there's almost a bit of a contradiction even in the term. If it's the fruit of the Spirit, then we should pray. We should ask God to give us self-control. But then if this is something we're getting from the Spirit of God, is it self-control? Or is it something else altogether? Getting that balance right, and how much of this is us striving and self-denial and something which we are trying to get better in our spiritual discipline, and how much of this is actually recognizing our own brokenness and need for God, that actually we can't do this under our own strength.
Yeah, it's really interesting as someone who uses a Benedictine rhythm of prayer and praying the Psalms through many days. There's a little prayer called a collect, which appears each and every day. And usually across the weeks in, say, ordinary time, those collects would just be the same. They'd be the Sunday one that appears on Sunday. But during Lent, there's two different collects every single day.
Yep.
And almost every single one of them is some request for God to help us with these things that we've committed to help us with the fasting, to help us with the prayer, to help us with the charity. So there is a complete recognition in those prayers that whilst I've committed to these things and I try and I work on them, that I can't actually do that apart from God. And I've often said during Lent that a failed Lent is almost the most successful Lent. Because if you get to the end of Lent and you've nailed the self denial, there's this chance to congratulate yourself.
Yeah.
But if you fall flat on your face or you're praying every single day because it's really hard, God, I need your help, then it's a recognition that we cannot do this apart from God, which is the whole point of Easter. It's the whole point of the crucifixion and the resurrection, that we can't save ourselves. So my ability to deny myself or engage in self-control completely requires God and the work of the Holy Spirit in me.
Now, to an extent, this is none of my business, but I imagine over the years, with the different things that you set aside for Lent, those things that you do make a decision, well, this is going to be my self-discipline, my self-denial, my fasting for the Lenten series. What's the process that you go through in terms of deciding what it will be this year? Is it the regular thing? Is it the same thing every year? Or do you go through a bit of a process to go, hey, what is it, God, that you would like me to pause as we go into the Lenten season? What's the process for you, Frank?
I'd like to offer some deeply spiritual answer to that, but I wrote a thing on my Substack this year. I called it "Crashing into Lent," which is pretty much every Lent for me. I get to Ash Wednesday and I'm like, oh
yeah,
what am I going to be giving up? And I look back and I think, oh man, I should have spent a whole lot more prayer in that. And there'll be people who do that wonderfully. That's not me. And I am of the mind that there are some traditional fasts that you can follow, say giving up meat on Friday, various things that the church has done throughout the years is something that everybody would engage in. So if you crash into Lent and you've got nothing, just leaning into those can be really helpful. But I think just picking anything. So I have no great formula. I'm just like, okay, what is it that I'm going to give up this year? And it usually happens on Ash Wednesday as a flurry of thought. But I think committing to anything and sticking to that thing, and again, recognizing the need for God's help, no matter what it is that you've committed to, I think is extremely worthwhile.
Perhaps even in your lack of planning, there is a reliance on God, Frank, for him to reveal that thing that is perhaps an obstacle in your relationship with him. Hey, I certainly appreciate what you do bring to the table and sharing your experiences spiritually and inspiring other people in this regard. Frank, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for being on the program.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.